The apartment was quiet, as it always was at dusk. Armin leaned against the windowsill, a mug of tea warming his fingers while the world outside sank into that soft, golden haze before nightfall. Across the narrow street, beyond a row of identical balconies, he noticed the silhouette again, the man in the fourth-floor flat who always stood by his own window around this time as though waiting for something. Or someone. Armand didn't know his name. He never waved. Neither did the stranger. But for the past 3 weeks, their eyes had met more evenings than not. There was nothing dramatic about it, no lingering stares or secret signals, just glances. Quiet, unassuming glances that somehow pressed deeper than words. They'd become a silent rhythm, slipping into Armin's days like a breath he didn't know he was holding. It hadn't started with interest. It had started with curiosity, born from routine and the still ache of a life too silent. Armin lived alone, his job remote, and his social circle thin since the move. He hadn't meant to notice the man at the window. He simply had. And now, not noticing him felt impossible. He watched how the stranger's fingers curled around his own mug, how he always wore the same grey hoodie with the sleeves pushed to the elbows. His face wasn't always visible, just fragments, glimpses between curtains and shadow. But he had a presence, a weight that settled in Armand's chest when the man appeared, and a hollowness when he didn't. Tonight, though, something was different. The stranger looked directly at him, not a passing glance, but a gaze that held. Armin's breath caught. For a full moment, neither of them moved. Then the man gave a small, hesitant nod. Barely there, but real. Armin's heart stumbled. He nodded. Back before he could second-guess himself, it was nothing. A nod between two men who had never spoken, separated by glass and city air. But Armin felt it echo inside him, the tiniest thread drawn between two isolated hearts. He didn't know what it meant, didn't dare let his mind shape it into something fragile and foolish. And yet, when the stranger disappeared from the window minutes later, Armin remained still, his tea cold in his hands. He stared at the empty frame across the street, a quiet thought blooming where loneliness had lived. What if this wasn't just coincidence? Outside, night unfurled across the sky. Inside, Armin stood motionless, watching the place where the man had stood. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel quite so alone. The next evening, Armin stood at the window earlier than usual. He hadn't planned to. His body simply moved there, as if his thoughts had drawn a map, and his limbs followed without protest. The apartment felt smaller than before, as if some part of it now reached across the street, across the glass. His hand trembled slightly as he pressed a sticky note to the window. Hi. It felt absurd the moment he stepped back. Childish even. But it stayed there, fluttering gently in the breeze that slipped through the old window frame. Armin waited, uncertain of what he was even hoping for. Yet when the man appeared at his window moments later, hoodie sleeves pushed. Up just like always, something inside Armin settled. The man's gaze found the note. He read it. His expression didn't change at first. But then he vanished. Armin's heart dropped. He exhaled in disappointment, turning away. But a sudden motion caught his eye. The man returned, with a sticky note of his own. He pressed it against his glass. Hello. It was ridiculous, impossibly simple, and yet Armin smiled wider than he had in weeks. Over the next several days they spoke through those notes. One word at a time, a quiet thread wove between them. Favorite book? Armin asked. The Little Prince, came the reply. Yours? Call me by your name. A pause, then a new note. Beautiful choice. Through brief exchanges, Armin learned the man's name was Sahil, that he played the piano, that he once hated the rain but now found comfort in its noise. Armin shared pieces too, his love for old photographs, his fear of planes, the night he sat on a train for hours just to avoid going home. Their notes grew longer. The silence between them, once filled with uncertainty, was now something sacred. Still, they had never spoken aloud, never stepped outside their windows. There was a strange intimacy in the distance, a safety in the separation. Armin didn't understand it, but he didn't question it either. He only felt its pull. Some nights they didn't even write. They simply sat at their respective windows, watching each other in quiet companionship. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something raw, tender, and startlingly real. And yet, beneath the warmth, Armin felt the familiar shape of fear curling at the edges. He remembered what it was like to be left, to be seen just long enough to be forgotten. This, whatever this was, felt too delicate, too easy to lose. Still, when he wrote, "What scares you the most?" and saw Sahil pause for longer than usual before replying, Armin knew he wasn't alone in that fear. Sahil's note read, "Being known too deeply, and not being wanted after." Armin stared at those words for a long time. Then he smiled, touched his note to the glass, and wrote, "Me too." 3 nights passed without a single note. At first, Armin tried to rationalize it. Maybe Sahil was away, or sick, or simply needed space. But each evening he waited by the window, and each evening he was met with nothing but an empty room across the street. The curtains stayed drawn, the light off. The silence, once comforting, now pressed into his chest like a weight. By the 4th night, Armin could no longer pretend. Something had shifted. He sat at his window longer than usual, his gaze fixed on Sahil's window as if willing him to appear. But the glass remained cold and blank, as if the man had never been there at all. He felt foolish. The notes, the connection, the tenderness, it all seemed like a dream, the kind you cling to before waking. Had he misread everything? Was it possible to imagine a bond so vivid, only for it to evaporate without warning? On the 5th night, Armin didn't go to the window. He sat on the couch instead, lights off, a record playing low in the background. But something made him glance outside. A flicker, movement, and then he saw Sahil again. But not alone. Through the frame of the window, Sahil stood close, too close, to another man. Their bodies were turned inward, their silhouettes almost touching. Armin leaned forward instinctively, a chill creeping over his skin. He watched as Sahil's hand reached up, brushing the other man's cheek. Then, without hesitation, he kissed him. The sight struck like a blow. Armin's breath hitched, and he pulled away from the window, shame flushing his face, even though no one could see him. The image seared into his mind, uninvited and cruel. He tried to look away, to dismiss it, but the truth settled with brutal clarity. Whatever they'd shared, whatever it had become, it hadn't meant the same to Sahil. A quiet knock at the door startled him. For a moment, Armin didn't move. His heart thundered. He stepped forward hesitantly, each footstep reluctant. When he opened the door, Sahil stood there, drenched from the sudden evening rain. His hair clung to his forehead, and his eyes, those same eyes that once looked across the street with a kind of gentle hunger, now searched Armin's face for permission. "I need to explain," Sahil said softly. Armin stared at him, unable to summon words. The weight of betrayal pressed down with every breath. "I wasn't lying," Sahil continued, "about what I felt, but it's complicated." Armin said nothing. He stepped aside, a silent invitation, or maybe a challenge. The door remained open. As Sahil entered slowly, dripping footsteps trailing behind him, Armin wondered which would hurt more, hearing the truth, or wishing he hadn't. Sahil stood in the middle of the room, water pooling at his feet, hands trembling as he tried to find the right place to begin. Armin leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly, his face unreadable. The silence between them was no longer tender. It pulsed with questions, bruised by disbelief. "I wasn't hiding him," Sahil said, voice barely audible over the rain. "He's my ex. He showed up unexpectedly. I hadn't seen him in over a year." Arman's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Every word Sahil spoke felt like it came a second too late. He wanted closure. He kissed me. I didn't kiss him back. Sahil met Arman's eyes. I pushed him away right after. Arman finally spoke, quiet but sharp. "You didn't have to let him in." "I know," Sahil admitted, "but I panicked. Part of me thought I should hear him out. That maybe I needed to untangle something old before stepping into something." "New?" Arman laughed once, bitter and short. "And what exactly are we, Sahil? New? A window habit with sticky notes and borrowed glances? You've never even touched me." Sahil stepped forward. "Does that make it less real?" Arman hesitated. The truth was, it had been real, for him. Every note, every moment of silent understanding had stitched itself into his days. It wasn't about the lack of touch. It was about trust. And that trust now lay cracked on the floor like rainwater beneath Sahil's shoes. "I was scared," Sahil said, voice cracking. "I thought what we had was fragile. But after these days without talking, without seeing you, I realized it wasn't fragile. It was mine. I messed up, Arman, but please don't let that moment ruin everything we were building." The words hung between them, soaked in honesty and hesitation. Arman didn't answer right away. He walked toward the window instead, staring at the spot across the street where this had all begun. The distance between the two buildings suddenly felt like a metaphor for everything, so close, yet always something in between. "I saw something in you," Arman said quietly. "Not just someone to watch, someone to be seen by. That's rare." Sahil stepped closer, more careful now. "You still do." Slowly, Arman turned. For a breathless moment, neither spoke. The past couldn't be rewritten. The pain wouldn't vanish overnight. But there was something raw and human in their proximity. Two men standing in the aftermath of a misstep, deciding whether to rebuild or walk away. Without speaking, Arman reached for a pen and pressed a fresh, sticky note to the window pane. Sahil watched it appear from the outside, just as he had the very first time. The note read, "If we try again, no more secrets." Sahil pressed his palm to the glass from the street below, nodding once, slow, deliberate, and full of promise. And, just like that, the story that began in silence found its way into something deeper, something honest.